Level 1. The Backyard Beginner. You're 12 years old, and the rifle is a single-shot .22 that belonged to your grandfather before it belonged to you. The stock is scratched from decades of use, and the sight is slightly off-center, something you don't know yet because you don't have anything to compare it to. Your dad walks you into the woods behind the house before sunrise, a stretch of maybe 8 acres that borders a cornfield nobody's farmed in 2 years. You're wearing a jacket that's too big because it used to be his. You sit on an overturned bucket for 3 hours and see nothing. Not a squirrel, not a rabbit, nothing. Your legs are asleep, and you're cold in a way you didn't know cold could feel, and you ask if you can go home. He says 15 more minutes. On the 15th minute, a squirrel moves along a branch 40 feet up. Your hands shake so badly the barrel wavers across the whole tree. You miss twice. The third shot connects. It's not a deer, it's not anything anyone would be impressed by, but you field dress it yourself with your dad guiding your hands, and something changes in the way you see the woods after that. You start noticing things you never noticed, tracks in soft dirt, the difference between a deer trail and a rabbit run, which trees drop acorns and which ones don't. You spend the next 2 years hunting small game with that same .22, rabbits mostly, the occasional squirrel, learning patience the hard way through hours of boredom that occasionally break into 10 seconds of adrenaline. You miss more than you hit. Every miss teaches you something about wind, about breathing, about how your own heartbeat moves the barrel more than you'd think possible. This is how it starts for almost everyone who hunts seriously later in life. Not with a trophy, with a squirrel and a bucket and a rifle that's older than your parents. Level 2, the Deer Camp Nephew. You're 15 now, and your uncle invites you to deer camp for the first time, a cabin 2 hours from home with no cell signal and a wood stove that everyone takes turns feeding overnight. 6 men, 3 generations, and you're the youngest by 11 years. You don't know the language yet. They talk about scrapes and rub lines and doe-to-buck ratios like it's common knowledge, and you nod along understanding maybe half of it. Your uncle hands you a borrowed .30-06 because you've outgrown the .22 for deer season, and you spend an afternoon at a makeshift range behind the cabin learning the recoil, which is nothing like the .22 and knocks you back half a step the first time you fire it. The camp has rules that took decades to form, and nobody explains them. You just learn them by watching. Who sits where at dinner, whose stand is whose, what happens if you leave a gate open on the next door property. You're assigned the worst stand, a ground blind at a low spot that everyone agrees rarely produces anything because that's what happens to the newest hunter in camp. You sit there for 4 mornings and see 1 doe too far to shoot ethically. On the 5th morning, a 6-point buck walks within 30 yards and stops broadside. Your heart is doing something you've never felt before. You remember what your uncle told you the night before. Breathe out halfway and squeeze. Don't pull. You do exactly that. The buck drops within sight, the first one you've ever taken, and when you walk up to it, your hands are shaking again, the same way they shook over the squirrel 3 years earlier, except now there are 5 grown men walking over to shake your hand, and someone's already got a knife out to start the process of teaching you how to field dress something this size. That night at dinner, you get the good seed for the first time. Nobody says why. You already know.
Level 3. The Serious Hunter. You're 18, and hunting isn't something you do a few weekends a year anymore. It's something you plan your entire fall around. You've bought your own rifle now, a .270 you researched for 2 months before landing on it, paid for with money from a part-time job at the feed store. You've also picked up a bow, a compound set at 45 pounds that took you all summer to learn to shoot accurately. Bow hunting is a different discipline entirely. Rifle hunting rewards patience and a steady trigger pull from a distance. Bow hunting demands you get inside 20, sometimes 15 yards of an animal with senses built specifically to detect you at that range. You spend money you don't really have on scent elimination spray and a scent control suit, and you launder your hunting clothes in scent-free detergent and store them in a sealed tote with dirt and leaves so they smell like the woods instead of your house. You learn to read wind direction like it's the only thing that matters, because during archery season, it is. You build your own tree stand setup, a climbing stand you carry in on your back for a mile through timber before first light. Your first bow kill takes you 3 seasons to get. Deer at 15 yards that somehow catch your draw, catch your movement, catch a change in wind you didn't account for, and vanish before you release. The 4th season, a doe walks a trail you've scouted for 6 weeks, stops at 18 yards, quartering away, and you make a shot you've practiced 10,000 times in the backyard. She runs 60 yards and drops. You track the blood trail in near darkness with a headlamp, found her tipped against a fallen log, and you sit next to her for a few minutes before doing anything else. Bow hunting changes something in how you understand the whole activity. Rifle hunting can feel like a math problem. Bow hunting feels like a conversation you're having with an animal that doesn't know you're in the room. Level 4, the land manager. You're 23 and you've leased 40 acres with 3 friends, splitting the cost 3 ways, a piece of mixed hardwood and cropland that nobody's managed seriously in a decade. Owning access to land, even leased, changes how you think about hunting. It's no longer just about the hunt itself, it's about everything that happens the other 350 days a year that make the hunt possible. You plant food plots, clover and brassicas in strips cut through the timber, and you learn soil pH matters more than you'd assumed, testing it yourself with a kit and adjusting with lime because the clover won't take otherwise. You put up trail cameras, a dozen of them eventually, and you spend winter evenings scrolling through thousands of images, building a mental map of which bucks are using which parts of the property and when. You learn to age deer on camera, judging body mass and antler development against known benchmarks, distinguishing a mature 4-year-old from a buck that looks impressive but is really only 2.5. You start managing the herd instead of just hunting it, passing on younger bucks you know will be significantly better in 2 years, a decision you cost you opportunities in the moment for a payoff you might not see for seasons. You clear shooting lanes with a chainsaw, hang stands in September for a season that doesn't open until October, and you learn to predict weather patterns that push deer to move, cold fronts after warm stretches, the days before a full moon. The property produces its first genuinely mature buck in year 3 of your management, a 10-point you'd watched on camera for 2 full seasons before he finally made a daylight mistake during the rut. You realize hunting well is mostly land management with occasional hunting attached to it, and most people who call themselves hunters have never done the land management part at all.
Level 5, the known name. You're 27, and people in the hunting community around you know who you are, not because you're famous, because you're good, and you're generous with what you know. You've started sharing hook set photos and short breakdowns of your season on a hunting forum, and then an Instagram account that grows slowly, a few hundred people who follow specifically because your posts are detailed, instead of just trophy photos. You start helping people, not professionally, just because someone asks and you have the time. A coworker's teenage son wants to start bow hunting, and you spend a Saturday setting up his bow and walking him through form. A guy from the forum drives 4 hours to hunt public land with you because you've built a reputation for being able to pattern deer on pressured ground where most people give up. You develop a specific skill that separates you from casual hunters: calling. You learn to read a buck's body language during the rut and match your calling to what he's telling you. A soft grunt when he's relaxed, an aggressive snort wheeze when he's already agitated by another buck nearby. You call in a buck for a stranger on public land that he's chased for 3 years, and the video of it that's more traction than anything you've posted before. 40,000 views from people who've never met either of you. You start getting messages asking for advice on gear, on tactics, on specific properties. You realize you've become a resource without ever intending to be one, which is different from being famous and more useful. Level 6,
the professional guide. You're 30 and you're doing this for money now, seasonally, guiding hunters on a ranch 3 states away during a 6-week stretch each fall that you take unpaid leave from your regular job to do. The transition from hunting for yourself to guiding for clients reveals something the personal side never did. When it's your hunt, a missed opportunity is disappointing. When it's a client who's paid $4,000 and taken a week of vacation for this, a missed opportunity because you read the wind wrong or put him in the wrong stand is a professional failure with real consequences. You learn to manage expectations before a hunt even starts, explaining honestly what's realistic for the property and the time of year, instead of overselling it the way some outfitters do. You develop skills that have nothing to do with your own hunting ability, judging a client's actual shooting proficiency at the range before ever letting them draw on a live animal, reading their frustration level after 3 quiet days and adjusting strategy or expectations accordingly, knowing which stand to put an impatient client in versus a patient one on the same property on the same morning. You track a client's wounded buck for 6 hours through thick creek-bottom terrain, losing the blood trail twice and finding it again by expanding your search pattern methodically instead of guessing, and you recover the animal as the sun is setting, a moment that means more to you than most of your own kills at this point. The ranch owner tells you at the end of the season that 3 separate clients specifically requested you for next year. That's the currency in this business, not the animals taken, the requests for you specifically.
Level 7, the outfitter. You're 35 and you've started your own operation, a small outfitting business built on relationships with 3 landowners who lease you exclusive hunting rights across nearly 2,000 acres combined. You're not just a guide anymore. You're running a business with insurance requirements, liability waivers, a website, marketing during the off-season, and a waiting list that runs 18 months out for prime rut week dates. The mechanical skill of hunting is the easy part now. The hard part is everything else. Negotiating lease renewals with landowners who get better offers from competitors every year, managing client expectations set by outfitters on television who show only the successful hunts and none of the misses, handling a client who's furious he didn't fill his tag after 5 days despite you doing everything correctly, because sometimes deer just don't cooperate, and that reality is harder for some clients to accept than others. You hire your first employee, a young guide you trained yourself, from someone who barely knew how to read sign a year earlier, and watching him call in a buck for a client using techniques you taught him produces a specific kind of satisfaction that killing an animal yourself stopped producing years ago. Your operation gets written up in a regional hunting magazine after a client takes a buck that scores in the top 10 for the county in a decade, and the article brings in enough inquiries that you're booked 2 full seasons out within a month of it publishing. You've built something that exists independent of your own hunting, a business that would survive if you personally never pulled a trigger again, which is a strange thing to realize after 20 years of measuring yourself by your own tag. Level 8, the record holder. You're 41, and the buck hanging in your processor's cooler right now is going to score high enough to place in the state records, maybe the national ones. You know this because you've been watching him on camera for 4 seasons, because you passed him at 2.5 and again at 3.5 when other outfitters would have let a client shoot, because you understood his patterns better than he understood them himself by the end. You took him yourself on the property you managed, not a client hunt, a personal one you'd been saving specifically for this deer. The hunt itself lasted 4 mornings of a rut you'd predicted almost to the day based on 11 years of data you'd kept on that property. He came from a direction you hadn't expected, using terrain you'd initially dismissed as unlikely, and the shot came together in under a minute after 4 mornings of nothing. The score comes back after the mandatory drying period, high enough to rank among the largest ever recorded for the region. You don't post about it for 2 weeks. When you finally do, the response comes from hunters across the country, some congratulating you,
A few accusing you of high fencing or baiting or something else that would explain a deer this size. Comments from people who've never managed a property for a decade and don't understand what that kind of patience actually produces. You let the accusations go without responding to most of them. The people who understand what happened don't need an explanation, and the people who don't will never accept one.
Level 9. The Legacy. You're 52, and you've scaled the outfitting business back, guiding only a handful of hunts each season yourself, letting the 4 guides you've trained handle most of the clients now. 2 of them have left to start their own operations, with your blessing and occasionally your reference. You spend more time now teaching than hunting. A youth mentorship weekend you run each spring for kids who don't have someone at home to take them, teaching 12-year-olds the same patience you learned on an overturned bucket 40 years ago. You still hunt, but differently. Fewer sits, more time simply in the woods without a weapon, watching, because the watching was always the part you loved more than the killing. You just didn't know that at 12. The .22 your grandfather gave you sits in a case in your office now, retired from hunting, but never sold, never will be. Somewhere right now, a 12-year-old is sitting on an overturned bucket behind a house, cold in a jacket that's too big, wondering if 15 more minutes is worth it. They're going to miss twice before they connect on something small enough that nobody else would call it impressive. They're going to spend years learning patience through boredom that occasionally breaks into 10 seconds that matter more than anything else in their week. Most of them will stop somewhere along the way. A few will keep going, level after level, season after season, until the woods stop being something they visit and start being something they understand. That's how it's supposed to work.